Hello, I'm Andy Schmuckler. I'm here to express an idea. It's just a small idea, but it relates to a pretty big problem, which is now that the most powerful person in the United States is a man who apparently has explicitly at some point described power as a matter of being able to make people afraid. Uh, Intimidation is what he likes power in order to do. We could get into a psychology about what all the ways in which power must have been used on him to make him feel so invested in being the one who wields power. We know that abused children often become child abusers when they become parents. There's a psychology there, but to hell with Trump. How do we protect America from the skill that this guy actually has in intimidating people? And now that he's become president of the United States again, commander-in-chief of our military, chief law enforcement officer in charge of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, how do we protect ourselves from allowing power to become just what he has in mind, which is one person bent on domination, intimidating other people into submission, which he's been very successful at? Well, there are various ways in which he intimidates people, and some of them require people to get security protection. I mean, Anthony Fauci having to hire security protection for himself and his family. I mean, what an absurdity. What an atrocity that is. Maybe my idea could be extended to the area of people having legitimate fears for their basic physical security because Trump can sick his violent supporters on people that he designates as targets, which is why he got those what were they called, gag orders from the courts when he was being tried. There is that. And then there's the way he threatens to sue people, like the pollster in Iowa. He's threatened to sue her because she came up with a finding, probably perfectly legitimately, even if it turned out to be mistakenly, before the election, that Iowa was going to turn blue and vote for Kamala Harris. He wants to punish her for that. And every time he wants to punish somebody, it's also a way of intimidating everybody else. So if we're going to remain a free society or protect what freedoms that we already still have that he hasn't managed to take away, we not only have to protect people from that kind of thing for their sake, but also for all the people of the country who witness, well, this is what happens if you oppose Trump. That's where the whole thing is. That he releases people from prison who have committed real crimes on his behalf, and he threatens to send to prison people who have committed no crime, according to American law, except he considers it a crime to oppose him. We've seen how successful he's been at intimidating ABC into paying whatever it was, $15 million because of George Stephanopoulos spoke maybe inexactly in a way that he didn't like. And we've seen a lot of people bend the knee to him, not just Scarborough and Brzezinski going to kiss that ring, but some of the second and third most richest people in the country, Bezos of Amazon and Washington Post fame, and Zuckerberg of Amazon and whatever else he's got, Instagram fame. These extremely rich people who have essentially capitulated to him. And people have said, well, if people with those kinds of resources are not going to stand up to Donald Trump, how do we expect people who don't have those kinds of resources? Well, that's where my idea comes in. At least with respect to the nuisance legal things that Trump might do, suing a pollster in Iowa or going after with as if people who have been critical of him have committed some wrongdoing and bringing the law to bear against them. And people have said, reasonably, if people with billions of dollars like Bezos and Zuckerberg are afraid of what Trump might do, what about the people who don't have any kind of resources? People that can get ruined by being dragged into court to defend themselves against a powerful person who now is commander in chief and head of the executive department. Well, I think it's a fairly finite number of people who are actually under the gun of this kind of SLAPP, what's it called? Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. SLAPP lawsuits is a way for people with big bucks that can afford a legal department intimidating, driving into silence or submission or whatever people who don't have money to hire a lawyer to protect them in the legal process. Well, what I suggest is that the good billionaires, and there are a few of them who have been explicitly against Trump. I won't bother to name the ones that I know, but there's money not just on the part of the oligarchs that Trump has put together, but there are people with a lot of money for whom it would not take more than pocket change to set up a fund which would have as its purpose anybody who meets certain criteria, which I'm not going to bother to try to articulate, but people who are being subject to these SLAPP kinds of prosecutions or suits would have immediate access to good legal representation so that Trump can't intimidate just average Americans, people in the FBI, or people who have been in office, people who have criticized him and who have therefore become on his enemies list and Kash Patel's enemies list. People who maybe they've made decent money, but decent not by the standards of being able to go toe to toe with a whole legal establishment and a corrupt Department of Justice. So I think it would just, I don't know, maybe even just $1 billion. I mean, that goes a long way, even at $400 an hour or whatever the lawyers would be charging. Takes a lot of hours, and it would be, I think, useful also to show the American people that we can stand up for ourselves. And I would like to see a few legal funds set up to help Americans who are subject to this kind of Trumpian intimidation as he works to make himself into a fascist dictator and overthrowing American democracy, which I think is ultimately what it would come down to if we don't defend ourselves well. And maybe there's money enough to be able to say anybody who's targeted by Trump in a way that makes them think that those people who have been released from prison, the people who beat up the cops at the Capitol, the people who shouted, "Hang Mike Pence," if those people are whoever is legitimately afraid that they might be in danger, that what happened to what's his name, Paul Pelosi, might happen to them. How much money would it take in a fund to make sure that people with who have been targeted in that kind of way? I don't mean targeted like Paul Pelosi was, but I mean targeted the way The gag orders targeted judges and their families and prosecutors. If those people could have security details paid for by American citizens who happen to have a whole lot more money than they're ever going to need for themselves or their children or their grandchildren, that could be funded by means of just setting up an institution with a fund and a small staff that can go through the applicants and say, yeah, these people deserve legal representation or these people deserve security details. So that's my idea. We got a lot more to protect ourselves against than these suits and these prosecutions. But you gotta, we're going to face a multi-dimensional, multifaceted threat to the freedoms that we have had as Americans for generations, or most Americans have had anyway. And it'll take a lot of different ideas to make what use we can of the resources available to us when the United States government is under control of these fascists and this bully. So that's my idea. Is it a good one? Is there something to do with it? Thanks for listening. And if you want to see my big ideas, of which I to which I've devoted my life's work, that one back there is about why these kinds of destructive forces arise in civilization. And that one back there from before, just months before Trump entered the political arena, it's called What We're Up Against, the destructive force at work in our civilization and how we can defeat it, about the rising force of fascism that I've been observing since the early 90s and issuing kind of fruitless warnings that this thing is coming. But I think everybody can see it has arrived. And if you want to see my bigger picture ideas to understand the forces at work and the nature of the battle that these things I'm talking about today are just little pieces of, please go to my website, abetterhumanstory.org, and look through my YouTubes, some of which are devoted to the big picture. And please subscribe, because I'm going to be embarking shortly on trying to lay out in videos what I've laid out in written texts, which has been my profession for 60 years. What the situation is, not only in America, but as this American crisis is being part of a larger historical process where we, the civilization-creating creatures, have unleashed a destructive force, not because we're evil creatures, but because we stepped into an anarchic situation out of our breakthrough into out of the niche in which we evolved biologically into civilization, which is to say, we became the first creatures ever to start inventing our own way of life, which has some strengths and blessings to it. You know, we can make these videos. We got lots of great stuff, but it also inevitably unleashes a destructive force from the very beginning. And in our time, that destructive force has manifested itself in a Republican Party that nominated and elected Donald Trump president. Thank you. Bye-bye.